What I'm about to say shouldn't be controversial, but to some people it is. At the root of gender dysphoria, for many, lies a desire for cross-sex embodiment that carries an erotic charge. Some people say these feelings are always a maladaptive sexual fetish. I think they're wrong. Others deny that sexual feelings have anything at all to do with gender dysphoria. I think they are also wrong. Today, I will tell you the truth about this controversial issue from a clinical and psychological point of view, and most importantly, we'll approach this with compassion and empathy. Welcome to The Metaphor of Gender. I'm Sasha, a therapist, and this channel is for curious people who prefer deep thinking over dogma. We explore identity, meaning, and how to live life well. In this series, Hidden Roots, we're exploring 7 different factors that can contribute to gender dysphoria. While these are not cut and dry and they can't be placed into perfectly discrete boxes, I am making a video dedicated to each one. Remember, these factors can overlap, coexist, and even change over time. In our last video, we discussed how an intellectual rejection of the gender binary plays a role in some people's gender dysphoria. And today, I'll share my clinical perspective on how the erotic desire for cross-sex embodiment drives gender dysphoria for some people. First of all, there is nothing wrong with having thoughts or feelings which are kind of weird or hard to categorize. I don't believe in thought crimes, because the fantasies in our minds don't hurt anyone. In therapy, for example, when a person has a secret thought or recurring fantasy that they think is unusual or that they feel deeply ashamed about, it may take a lot of time and trust with their therapist before mentioning anything about this in a session. But ultimately, being honest, bringing things out into the light, and dealing with the reality of our thoughts and feelings is a must for self-awareness and for growth. So from this spirit, I just want to reiterate that this is okay. Our minds can go to very unusual places, and that doesn't necessarily mean anything is wrong or needs to be fixed. So when I say erotic desires for embodiment, what does that mean? And how do these desires show up? Let me explain. Some people report imagining themselves as the opposite sex and feeling exhilarated by it, and sometimes even sexually aroused. The excitement and the fantasizing can start from a very young age. However, most often, these desires will emerge around puberty as a person's sexuality is coming online, so to speak. By the way, both in my personal experience and in the clinical literature, erotic elements to gender dysphoria occur most often in biological males. So for the remainder of this video, I'll be speaking about those kinds of experiences. So around puberty, for example, some boys might fantasize about cross-dressing, secretly trying on their mom's clothing or their sister's underwear, or begin to incorporate a feminized version of themselves into their fantasy life. These days, there are also a lot of different erotic materials online. There are gender-bending anime characters or digital art of males turning into females and transformations. And on the more X-rated side, there are various genres of pornography, including gender transformation themes and even things like forced feminization. Online, people may also experiment by taking and posting selfies, wearing sexy clothes, or looking seductive. Now, honestly, it can be really hard to know what role these erotic materials and someone's virtual life might be playing here. Does someone's interest in these particular online behaviors simply reveal their pre-existing underlying preferences? Or are we talking about brain plasticity and the impact of algorithms on adolescent sexuality, where there's a sort of hedonic treadmill and an escalation towards more stimulating and maybe even more unusual materials? And let me just define this term because it's actually really useful. Hedonic adaptation, sometimes referred to as the hedonic treadmill, explains why new stuff only makes us happy for a short time. In the 1970s, psychological researchers observed that when we have a significant new positive experience, it makes us happy, but only for a short time, because we quickly adapt and end up back at our old baseline of happiness. So if you get a new cell phone, initially it will make you feel really excited and happy, but pretty soon it just becomes your phone, and the joy that you had at first fades. And with these online materials, there can be a similar pattern, right? New genres of pornography might initially create a great deal of stimulation and excitement and arousal, but after a while, viewing a lot of that material just becomes somewhat normal, and the person might need more extreme or edgy content to get that same sense of novelty and arousal from it. So now back to the erotic embodiment fantasies. These fantasies don't always have the same intensity, valence, or drivers. So for some people, the fantasy is really an attempt to resolve severe distress and discomfort with the maleness of their body. In these cases, the fantasies of feminization might be associated more with soothing or calming or an alleviation of distress more than some kind of arousing euphoria. Some people describe mentally taxing shifts that they have to do with their minds in order to achieve some mental state of femininity. And achieving this perceptual state can be very difficult, and it's often precarious and fragile, where small moments and small reminders of biological reality can disrupt and break this idealized self-image. Now, of course, when there is a great deal of envy or jealousy towards biological women, this can also seriously complicate relationships, both romantic or otherwise. While other people are not really distressed with their male genitals or physiology, but for them the driver might be simply how great it feels to dress in women's clothes or to imagine themselves socially as a woman. Cross-sex embodiment fantasies can also exist on a gradient. So again, for some, these feelings might be just a little whisper in the back of the mind, not necessarily causing too much distress or disruption to daily life. But at the other end of the gradient, someone can become completely overwhelmed by these thoughts and feelings, really struggling to get through daily life, becoming almost obsessed with the project of feminization. And of course, as you can probably imagine, that would lead to a great deal of dysphoria and disruption to their life. Now, sexuality is also complicated here, especially when the person feels a lot of distress about their genitals, making certain types of sexual relationships and sexual contact very challenging. Sometimes a person might fantasize about being in relationship with a man or having sex with a man, because in part, this emphasizes their own femininity by contrast, and therefore can reduce the gender dysphoria. Others instead might pursue romantic relationships with biological women. Now, I know this is a very personal and sensitive subject. This might have been challenging for you to hear about, but if you've had some of these experiences yourself, maybe it was a relief to have your reality recognized and described here. Here's a reflection you can do on your own. Have you ever had sexual feelings when imagining yourself as a different sex? What about while dressing in clothes that are typically worn by the other sex? And when you consider this, what thoughts and feelings come up? Try to observe your thoughts and feelings with a little distance and without judgment. Okay, that's it for today. Keeping one foot in reality and one in possibility. I'll see you next time. And for more videos about the roots of gender dysphoria, click right here. This information is meant for educational purposes only, and not as a substitute for mental health services.